go anywhere, so he just stays in the mouth of the Jordan. The Jordan River comes into the Dead Sea on the top. So you find some fish up there occasionally. They got lost. But in principle, nothing lives in there.
Is the vegetation basically like this?
Well, yeah, I suppose.
It's not a sandy desert.
No, there are patches of sand, though. But it's not a sandy desert. But desert in general isn't sandy. When there's no water.
Is that the case?
That's the case of the Negev.
It is fertile.
Sure. A lot of it's fertile.
Like Beersheba?
Beersheba is very fertile. And it has water. The whole Negev is a huge agricultural area now. And it was then in the old days too. The Nabateans were there, and they were.
There's Lot's daughters, children?
Yeah, Lot's. That's their incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughters. Anyhow, and one was called Ben Ami, and he was the father of the Ammonites, and the other was called Moab. And that was in the Parashat HaShavua 2 weeks ago or something. 3 weeks ago. Except they don't read that in synagogue because it's not nice.
It depends on if you're going to translate this, translate the reading.
If you don't translate, then don't read it.
I read it and I translate it.
Groves, parking lot, restaurant.
Food.
Fine. What's he doing there? He's spraying. What's he doing? He's spraying.
Brian, wake up. Look at this. Brian.
Wait, slow down!
Stop.
What is that?
What is he doing that for?
Look at the anachronism there. Camels on the side with a
Why is that man fishing on the telephone? The hell is happening?
They keep me spraying to keep the salt off.
I don't know what he's doing. I don't know why he's doing it.
Where is it? Can you take my camera? Good bag.
You gotta lubricate the camels while they're at it. Never saw that. It's more difficult than it looks.
I think when you make this climb, will determine what kind of shape you're in. What do you think?
Shouldn't be any problem.
Shouldn't be. And that's what they're doing. That's the climb up.
Incredible. Now our group hasn't started climbing, have they?
No, you're still here buying water.
Still here buying water.
And that's the cable. And then
I was 2.5 months in America. I was 2.5 months in America.
okay, this is the house of study here, guys. You want to study your paper, Jennifer? Do a review? Mark?
She doesn't know it. She doesn't know it.
Well, she's read it 3 or 4 times. She's rehearsed. Here's our group. On the top of Masada, just before we have the bar mitzvah. Mitzvah happens in a few minutes. Everyone's been very patient. Here's the mother.
The Jewish people in Jerusalem might throw him off the throne and get back to the family of the Maccabees who'd been here before. Now, he was right to be afraid about that. Because the whole dynasty started with Judah Maccabee and his brothers, and father, son, and all of a sudden you get to King Herod, and he seized the throne, and the Romans appointed him And he didn't know what the Jews were going to do. They didn't want him to be king. He wasn't supposed to be king. So the first thing he did was to fortify Masada, and all these walls and buildings and walls and rooms and everything we see here is to protect himself against the Jews. Now, everybody finish eating. The side of the Dead Sea. Here, if you want to see a map, look. Here it is. Here's the map.
Oh, the tongue is coming from the other side.
Now let's go to the other side. So what you see now is that this map is half wrong, because this map still shows water here, and the reason fortress we saw before had been underwater for the last 100, 200 years. It was above water now. Now, as long as this is land, then this is also a border fortification, and that's the second thing that was happening here. And he was protecting himself right here so that if the Jews attacked him, he could run out of the country and he could escape to Transjordan. Now, all that happened somewhere in the 30s BC. Herod died in 4 BC, everybody. Herod died in the year 4. Boy, these kids are noisy, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
That means there's a mistake in the Christian calendar, because Jesus was born when Herod was still alive. So, born at least 4 BC. 65 years after he died, there was a revolt of the Jews against Rome. The Zealots, the second period of history, they came up onto Masada. And in fact, what's it, 66, Herod died in 4, 70 years after Herod died. There was a revolt against Rome, and they came up here. The Romans had a little garrison up here. They threw them out. And when they threw out the garrison, they lived here for all 4 years of the revolt. They lived here from 66 to 70. In the year 70 AD, Jerusalem was destroyed. Those stones were ripped down from the temple. Jerusalem was destroyed and burnt. The Romans came to this place 2 years later, in the winter of 72. Most of the legions had already gone home. Vespasian and Titus. The middle is empty except for a few big palaces. Here is one of the biggest of these wall rooms. And this one, when they found it, they see that it's a room where people are meant to be sitting, just like you're sitting now. Therefore, it fits the definition of synagogue. Synagogos, sitting together. Now, when you do that, you then start to notice that the room is too big for a regular roof. So what did they do? They put a row of columns right here, just like Al-Aqsa Mosque yesterday. They put a row of columns here. Oh, I meant to explain that to you and I forgot. Oh, Laura, you were supposed to be mine. I have to explain Basilica to you. Anyhow, these columns hold up the roof. That's what they're all about. It's a big room. Did I explain Basilica?
No. Well, yeah, you did.
All right, I still owe you. We'll do it a touch. Anyhow, they also discovered that these the Roman legions, so they wouldn't be found. That means to say, everybody, that this thing was used as the synagogue by the people who were here later. Before them, it was used by the Romans. Before them, Herod built it, and he probably built it as a synagogue also, but you can't prove it. Between the time that Herod died and the time the Zealots came is 70 years, when the Romans had a garrison up on this place. The Romans had a garrison on. At the beginning of the revolt, the Jews came down from the Galilee, threw the garrison off, and they stayed up here and they collected up here all through the revolt and came down from Jerusalem after the revolt was over. So that by the time the revolt was over in 70 and Jerusalem was destroyed, there were nearly 1,000 people up here. So you have a building which has got 3 periods. It's been used for 3 times. You know what it was at the end.
I'm splashing around. It's a very nice atmosphere. It doesn't happen all that often. We're headed south. We were here the first day. We headed down here to eat lunch, to look at that big view from the south. And are we lucky that we saw all the stuff before it rained? I'm really very pleased.
I think it'd be
Out of Jerusalem and not very far.